Yeah, that works.
All right, well, good evening. I am Dr. Melody Cash, the co-director for the EMU Goshen College EMU DNP Consortium. On behalf of Dr. Julie Yoder, who is the co-director from Goshen College, and the entire DNP faculty, welcome to Margaret Furr's Doctor of Nursing Practice Project Proposal Defense. Thank you for joining us today for this important step in Margaret's DNP journey. Before I introduce Dr. Laura Yoder, who is the lead faculty for Margaret on her project, I will make a couple of announcements and reminders. The session is being recorded, and we ask that everyone keep yourself muted for the duration of the event. We invite you to keep your video on so we have a sense of community. You will likely want to see the speaker view. To see that view, you go to the top bar of the Zoom screen, and on the far right, you will see an option for gallery or speaker, and choose the speaker view. The schedule for this session is that Margaret will have 30 minutes for her presentation. I will put a warning chat at 5 minutes and 1 minute. After Margaret's presentation, there'll be time for the audience to ask questions. You may either ask the questions verbally or put your question in the chat, and I will ask your question for you. After that Q&A session, we ask that everyone accept Margaret's lead faculty and the project approval committee log off of the Zoom session, and we will continue to have some conversation with Margaret. Dr. Laura Yoder is serving as Margaret's lead faculty. Dr. Yoder is the EMU undergraduate director and has over 22 years of experience as a nursing faculty member. Prior to working at EMU, Dr. Yoder worked in acute care medical, surgical nursing, and cardiac step-down. She earned a BSN from Goshen College, her master's in adult primary care from the University of South Florida, and a PhD from the University of Virginia. I will now turn this over to Dr. Yoder to introduce Margaret and her team.
Thank you, Melody. Dr. Cash. It is great to see you all today. Welcome. We're happy you're here. It's my pleasure to introduce Margaret Furr to you. Margaret earned a BSN from EMU in 2001 and an MSN in education from Walden University in 2022. She holds numerous certifications, as you can see in the letters behind her name, including nurse executive, nursing professional development, medical surgical nursing, pediatric nursing, and psychiatric mental health nursing. Most recently, Margaret has advanced from a generalist in nursing professional development to specialist to magnet manager for Sentara RMH. And just last week, I believe, maybe the week before, but I think it was last week, was named the Director of Nursing and Patient Care Services in acute for the region. So she's moved into a regional leadership position for Sentara. Her new regional role involves oversight of nursing, professional practice, education, and magnet status. In her NPD specialist role, she has already championed numerous projects to improve patient safety and quality of care. Now she is formally demonstrating her capacity as a leader and change maker through the implementation of a DNP project as part of her doctoral studies at EMU/GC. In addition to myself as faculty lead, her advisory team includes practice mentor Tina Bibb, who joined us today. Tina has been serving as a nurse leader at Sentara RMH for many years. And her peer advisor in her class is Jennifer Walters. Margaret, we look forward to your presentation. Take it away.
Thank you so much. All right. I'm really pleased to be able to present my project today on improving the support of healthcare workers after workplace violence. Today, we're going to cover the background and significance of how I came to this project, the clinical question, the review of literature, facilitators and barriers that will impact this project, my theoretical and methodological framework, the plan, and then the outcomes we'll be examining as we progress. I'd like to start today with the definition of workplace violence. The most common definition comes from OSHA, which is that any act or threat of physical violence, harassment, intimidation, or other threatening, disruptive behavior that occurs at work. I'd also like to highlight the definition of support. which is providing emotional or practical help. I'm starting this background and significance with data from the practice site. So this project takes place in a community hospital with fewer than 250 beds located in the eastern United States and operating as a part of a larger healthcare system of 12 hospitals. Our hospital emergency department manages about 180 to 200 patient visits daily, while the inpatient census ranges from about 120 to 130. This facility also includes a 20-bed inpatient behavioral health unit. Here's some of our data locally and from a system view. System-wide, which is the graph on the right, across all 12 hospitals, there have been 1,284 instances of workplace violence year to date, so 3/4 worth of data in 2025, of which 90 were at our local community hospital project site. Of these 90 instances, 58% were physical or a combination of physical and verbal. System-wide, there have been 305 instances of workplace violence with injury and 30 with injury at the local hospital site. Overall, workplace violence total numbers, as you can see, have increased 24% from 2024 to 2025 across the system, and 50% from 2024 to 2025 for the practice site. I enter the workplace violence data for this project site, and before I was at my current role, I taught the physical de-escalation classes. Hearing the stories of workplace violence and the stories of staff's lack of support after workplace violence is what led me to choose this for my project. I heard story after story of, I was sitting and I got hit, and then the charge nurse told me there was nobody else to sit with that patient and just go back in. Or my leader asked me, what could I have done to prevent being hit? But they never asked how I was. These stories have guided my project. This graph is of the National Database of Nursing Quality Indicators, NDNQI data, on assaults on healthcare workers, as reported by Pascal et al. The green line on the bottom shows hospitals that have reported 20 quarters, because this is a fairly new metric that wasn't required up until recently. So this is 20 quarters worth of data, and this purple line is hospitals that have reported at least 12 or 3 years worth of data. Both lines, as you can see, indicate an increasing trend in assaults on nursing personnel. The purple line shows an increase from 14,434 in 2019 to 23,767 in 2023, which is a 65% increase. Further outlined in the study, of the victims, 62 to 64% were RNs, and most of the rest were unlicensed assistive personnel, which is what they call CNAs or patient care technicians. The highest rates of assaults are nurses who work in behavioral health, followed by emergency department nurses. They also reported 22 deaths of healthcare workers due to workplace violence events in the years between 2020 and 2023. This graph is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics from 2020. In it, you can see that healthcare workers, so healthcare workers are the red, have a much higher risk of injuries intentionally caused by other people. This is how they define it. Non-fatal workplace violence, injuries, and illnesses that result in days away from work. So 10.4 per 10,000 for healthcare versus 2.1 per 10,000 full-time workers overall. These rates, as you can see, have steadily increased from 2011 through 2018. Incidence rates of non-fatal intentional injuries were the highest, again, for those working in psychiatric and also substance abuse hospitals. Their rate is 124.9 incidents per 10,000 full-time workers. The literature also supports this sort of rate of workplace violence. Kaplan et al. Showed for prevalence, about 25% of healthcare workers report that they've experienced physical workplace violence, and 60 to 75% experience non-physical, so more like a verbal workplace violence. The ANA counts the cost of workplace violence at about $250,000 per incident, not including emotional distress. The impact of workplace violence can be staggering. Anxiety, headaches, insomnia, decreased job satisfaction, burnout, and then impact on their relationships. Physical injuries, post-traumatic thoughts, anxiety, fear, anger, stress, burnout, turnover, depression, post-traumatic stress, and then continuing on with more burnout and depression. Workplace violence has an impact on healthcare workers. This practice site does have current strategies to mitigate risk. They do use a validated scoring tool for aggression that contains interventions based on risk level. They use a risk for violence flag in their electronic medical record to identify patients who are at risk of causing violence or harm. And then there is an amazing core threat assessment team that evaluates patients who score high on aggression scoring or who have caused staff injuries. And these people lead interdisciplinary team meetings to help prevent further harm. There are clear system policies, and then there is a system pamphlet, but which is not widely used at the practice site. This project is a quality improvement project, and the quality improvement tools that I've used are part of the Lean Six Sigma toolkit, which I'll discuss further in my methodological framework section. This is a very simplified version of what turned out to be a very complicated process map, which would have made no sense if I had put it on the screen. Basically, all support stems on whether the healthcare worker who's experienced workplace violence reports that incident at all. And if the person they report it to does anything or gives them any support based on what they know or what they've seen done. So if they don't tell anybody, nothing happens. And if the person they tell doesn't know what the options are or doesn't provide support, nothing happens. Further on, official follow-up from unit leaders or risk management are triggered by putting in an online incident report. So the employee can place that, or a unit leader, such as a manager or unit coordinator, can place one on someone else's behalf. If the employee reported the incident to employee health, then you also get further follow-up with employee health. So again, depending on what kind of report or who the person tells is really what hinges any kind of support. Shown here is the SIPOC, the suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customers, that outlines the roles involved in the process of care of healthcare workers that have experienced workplace violence. This SIPOC highlighted the lack of long-term support and really the few options of support that are currently being provided to staff. I conducted focus groups, meetings, surveys to complete a project called Voice of the Customer. These were completed with security, risk management, managers, and healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence. From these, two main themes came out, the subpoena process and then overall support. So if you read on the right-hand side of what are the critical customer requirements, you can see that clarifying the subpoena process for managers was a high priority. And then for risk and security, a change that had happened where they used to be notified of subpoenas, and then there's a change that is only on a system level that anybody knows about it, was resulting in lack of support. So they would like to be notified again for workplace violence subpoenas. In terms of the voice of the customer, what do people want for support? Managers really want their staff to speak up about when they're getting injured. Risk managers want better training and just a way to decrease the number of events. Security wants to be part of this process, so they're aware of the tools that they can offer, because often they are involved in these workplace violence. We call security to help assist with these situations. And staff just want support. They want to feel heard, and they want that initial meeting or the conversation about it to be in a supportive way, not accusatory. The final analysis was the 5 whys. So to analyze this problem, a 5 whys assessment was done to identify the root cause of why there is an impaired experience of caring for healthcare workers after workplace violence. The root cause identified by the 5 whys was really a lack of structured process and a lack of clear instructions and guidance for unit leaders to be able to provide the care for healthcare workers that have experienced workplace violence. The final bit of data that I'd like to cover as part of this background is this annual member of the team survey. So our hospital conducts through Press Ganey an annual member of the team survey, and the 2024 survey indicated that only about 80% of healthcare workers at the hospital, so the hospital are the right 2 columns, felt that their leader was responsive when they raised an issue, which is a decrease of 8% from the 2023 data. The score has actually increased. I just got data back about a week ago, and the recently released 2025 data. Nurse leader responsiveness, nurse leaders' accessibility in the organization was 92%, went down to 83%, and then back up a little bit to 86%. So those are the 2 survey questions that I'll also be following as we work on this project. The final piece of data that we are watching is RN turnover. RN turnover rates are a high priority for this hospital, who has traditionally low, this is really exemplary, turnover rates, where we are now starting to see an increase. We were at 7.7 in 2023, 7.6 in 2024, and year-to-date 8% with a projected end of the year at maybe 12%. Moving on now to the clinical question. The phenomenon of interest is the experience of care for healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence at a medium-sized community hospital, which is part of a healthcare system in the Eastern United States. It aligns with our organization's strategic plan in terms of retention of staff. Gamble estimates the cost of turnover for one staff RN to be $56,300. It also aligns with their plan of staff satisfaction. Staff who experience workplace violence have distinct needs for support and care. This project seeks to determine if unit leader training and trauma-informed care and increased access to peer and organizational support for staff who experience workplace violence improves retention and staff satisfaction as compared to the current experience of care. The purpose of this project is to improve staff's experience of care from the organization and its leaders after an event of workplace violence. A robust literature review was conducted to look for effective strategies for responding for workplace violence. Much of the literature surrounding this topic is based on the experience of emergency department nurses or behavioral health nurses, as they have higher rates of workplace violence. You can see my search strategy keywords and exclusion criteria. At the end of the exclusion criteria, I ended up with 19 articles that were included in this review and project. From the literature, it appears that evidence-based practices to improve the experience of caring after workplace violence include streamlining reporting to encourage staff to report workplace violence, for managers and unit leaders to be trained and equipped to provide meaningful support, trauma-informed or intentional debriefing that does not place blame on the employee, but rather seeks to support them, and the use of a peer support system as an additional intervention that can improve the experience. This combination of practices will help ensure that staff feel supported during violent incidents and will then thus improve nursing satisfaction and reduce intention to leave. While Gillespie et al. Hypothesizes that the use of forensic nurses would aid in the support of staff who experience workplace violence, there are no studies to indicate that they have been effective in use. The use of forensic nurses or of a team of staff to provide peer support after workplace violence would, though, seem to add additional support to an organization for seeking to improve the care of staff following workplace violence. Finally, there's no literature that validates statistically that if training unit leaders in more trauma-informed interventions of supporting staff would improve staff support. The literature does indicate that unit leader support is the most effective intervention to improve perceived organizational support by staff who've experienced workplace violence. Facilitators include that the support of staff and strategies that improve staff retention and satisfaction are a very high organizational priority. This project is supported by security, quality, and patient safety and risk management leaders, as well as senior nursing leaders. There's a system-level focus on creating peer support groups using the critical incident stress model, and initial training of peer support groups have already happened, and the second classes of those have already been scheduled. Barriers to this project include the need to pay for training time for hourly employees, such as unit coordinators, patient care supervisors, and security. There's also always competing demands for time for unit leaders, which may impact their full follow-up with staff needed to adequately support them through workplace violence. The barriers to this project are minor and really should not prevent the project from moving forward. The theoretical framework of this project is a trauma-informed care model that's based on research by Folletti et al. On adverse childhood events and their impact on health. The purpose of trauma-informed care is to provide a framework for understanding and responding to trauma. The initial research outlines a framework that emphasizes the need of awareness of trauma, safety, rebuilding victims' feelings of control, and enabling them to find their strengths that will allow them to develop coping strategies. SAMHSA outlines the 4 assumptions about trauma-informed care. These include realization of how trauma impacts people, recognizing signs of trauma, applying appropriate trauma-informed responses that support a person physically and psychologically, and ensuring that interventions do not re-traumatize people. These assumptions will be used to guide the construction of a program to improve the experience of care for healthcare workers that experience workplace violence. I'm going to touch a minute on what is trauma. Trauma is the result of an event or a series of events that impacts a person's functioning and mental, physical, emotional, or spiritual health. It can be caused by abuse, violence, living through periods of distress. So not all healthcare workers who experience workplace violence will have a trauma response, but workplace violence can absolutely cause trauma to healthcare workers. This concept map outlines the relationship between workplace violence, trauma, responses to trauma by healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence, and trauma-informed care. Workplace violence can negatively impact the healthcare worker's physical, emotional, and mental health and can lead to a desire to leave the organizations and feelings of not being supported. The negative impact on the physical, emotional, and mental health is considered trauma. As outlined in the previous slide, SAMHSA outlines those 4 assumptions about trauma-informed care, and you can see how they've been integrated here into this project. These assumptions will be used to guide the construction of a program to improve the experience of care for healthcare workers who experience workplace violence. This program will include trauma-informed debriefings by unit leaders, a clearly written pamphlet for healthcare workers who have experienced workplace violence, a clarified subpoena process that allows staff to be able to press charges, a peer support program, long-term tracking of healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence trauma, and the ability of forensic nurses to be able to do a forensic exam or interview. The use of these trauma-informed processes should result in improved physical, emotional, and mental health, a decreased desire to leave, and increased support, which should then result in improved experience of care for healthcare workers who experience workplace violence. Six Sigma is a series of process improvement tools, and Lean is a method to decrease waste. The earlier use of Lean Six Sigma is automotive manufacturing. It was then implemented to healthcare probably around 2005, depending on which research you read. Harold further outlines the steps of Six Sigma, often referred to by the acronym DMAIC, so define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. In addition, Lean principles help organizations to reduce wasted time and supplies to increase efficiency. The use of these DMAIC tools will structure this project and identify areas that prevent the process from being clear and efficient. The Lean Six Sigma framework also ensures that key deliverables are tailored to the stakeholders and the results of the project are measurable and aims are clear. We've already covered many of these tools. We talked about the voice of the customer and SIPOC, the process map, and the 5 whys. The remaining work of this project will fall under the improved status state, and then the control phase will be in the data collection. So this is the FMEA, so a failure mode effect analysis. So to improve the process, an FMEA was performed that indicated that the most impactful components of this project would be clarifying the subpoena process, teaching leaders trauma-informed care principles for debriefing and following up, and creating a way to follow up with staff long-term, and then updating a brochure for staff to understand what resources for support. The way this works is you pull the potential failures and decide how severe that failure is, how frequent the occurrence would be, and then whether there would be anything that would help detect it, and then you multiply those numbers out, and the ones with the highest numbers are the things that you should work on first. So here is the project plan. So the project, again, is improving the experience of care for healthcare workers experiencing workplace violence. So the first component of this project includes clarifying the processes of organizational support. One crucial piece of this is clarifying the subpoena process so that healthcare workers who press charges receive organizational support as they go to court, and so the organization can provide needed evidence to strengthen the case. In addition, the formalization of a peer support team and sharing their availability with healthcare workers who want peer support will provide additional support for staff. Finally, ensuring that there is an easy process to access forensic nurses for forensic exams and interviews will add to the organizational support. All these components are then included in the workplace violence support brochure as it gets updated. This will ensure that staff who've experienced workplace violence have all the resources available in their hands to improve their access to these support systems. The participants of these components are healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence, and then members of the peer support team, forensic nurses, risk management, security. Long-term measurement of this program includes the staff turnover rates, the staff satisfaction scores from press gaining member of the team on those questions, are the leader accessible and responsive. The hypothesis is that improving the support during the stress of workplace violence should decrease the staff turnover and increase staff impression of their leaders' accessibility and responsiveness. In addition, qualitative data will be collected from healthcare workers who experience workplace violence to determine if their experience of care after workplace violence was improved by this system or adequate. Shown here is the current de-identified brochure. All the identified organizational support components will be included as this brochure is updated. As mentioned earlier, qualitative data will be collected from healthcare workers who experience workplace violence to determine their experience of care after workplace violence. This will allow for adjustments to the program to ensure that it meets the aims. To ensure ease of being able to interview healthcare workers, I think we should consider adding permission to the leader debriefing tool so leaders can collect interest or permission from healthcare workers for follow-up. The second main component of this project is a 30-minute educational training for unit leaders and leader tools for working with healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence. The training will start with workplace violence data, the results of the voice of the customer, and a summary of best practices from the literature. This will be followed by a short introduction to trauma-informed care. The next section will include the process of support for healthcare workers after workplace violence, including incident reporting, the support brochure, and organizational support options. There will be review and role-playing of trauma-informed debriefing and the use of the tool and the toolkit components. So the debriefing form, how to track follow-up over time, and how to access peer support would all be part of a toolkit. The participants for this program would include direct unit leaders, which includes patient care supervisors, unit coordinators, as they are not official leaders for units, or as they are the official leaders for the units during shifts when managers are not present. The main validation of the educational program will be a retrospective post and then pre-questionnaire of the leader's confidence in understanding the process and being able to use the trauma-informed care measures to support staff who've experienced workplace violence. The total number of anticipated participants is 50, and the total pool of people in this job is over 100. So this number should be achievable. The tool used to evaluate the education plan will be a 10-question Likert scale evaluation. The questions will be based on the 4 assumptions of trauma-informed approach, the system and hospital processes for healthcare workers experiencing workplace violence, and the leader responsibilities. So here you have the validation of scale 1 to 5. Pre and then post, so they're answering them at the same time, their knowledge before and after. So here's 5 potential questions. And then you'll see here, I've moved them into the recognition, response, and resisting re-traumatization. I'll take those verbiages out. I just wanted you to see how it was connecting to those 4 standards of trauma-informed care. I'll work with a statistician to conduct the needed reliability analysis and subsequent t-tests for checking statistical significance of pre- and post results. Between classes, the responses will be evaluated to ensure that the class is meeting the objective to increase the knowledge of trauma-informed care principles, and adjustments in the program will be made as needed to clarify areas where there's lower levels of knowledge after the class. Data will be collected with anonymous and voluntary surveys using the organization's IRB secure survey site. All data will be kept securely in the system. In addition to those 10 Likert, there are also 2 competence questions, so a slightly different scale, and then the 2 competence questions. This is the remaining parts of the project plan with the timeline. So scheduling educational offerings is the last part for this semester, and then finishing up the clarification on subpoenas, forensic nurses, checking the process mapping for the improved process, the brochure, the script, toolkit, and then all the parts before the education. This project has already received the organizational approval needed for a quality improvement project. This project will then need to go through IRB, I would assume through EMUs. In addition, IRB approval will be sought for this project at the organization's level, which will be required for dissemination of this project. Minimal resources will be needed for this. There'll be some minimal cost of probably under $1,000. Cost of supplies will be under $100. The majority of the cost is hourly training time. And then in terms of return on investment, again, that cost to replace one direct care nurse is $56,300. So if this project prevents one nurse from leaving the organization, then the return on investment will be significant. From an organizational standpoint, this project should be easily sustained over time. The use of the toolkit will allow leaders to share this with new leaders that they're mentoring. I will also video record the training to be used with new leaders and those who are unable to attend the class. The brochure will be available in the system-wide document repository. And then in terms of replication, this project should also be easily able to be replicated across the market and system, starting with the local market hospitals. Project outcomes will be measured over 2 years. Long-term data analysis for this project will include the member of team survey questions that we've already outlined. In addition, RN and PCT turnover rates will be monitored. This information is available on a monthly cadence. The member of the team is an annual. Balancing measures to watch for in this project include the possibility of increased assault rates due to increased reporting with the focus on this topic. Workplace violence is heavily underreported, and there's often an increase in reporting of workplace violence when there's a focus on the area. Other balancing measures would be productivity loss due to the training time of non-salaried leaders. Here is an example of the run chart. So again, monthly, I would be able to look at RN turnover, PCT turnover, workplace violence total, and workplace violence with injury. And then I would not have a member of the team data again until probably next November. To check in on the project, I'm proposing an every other month check-in with 10 managers or assistant managers, 10 unit coordinators, and then 2 people from the patient care supervisor or security level. So May, July, September, November, January, and March. To ask how's the experience of care for healthcare workers who've experienced workplace violence, what's going well, and if anything needs to be adjusted. And then here are my references. I want to say thank you so much to Dr. Yoder. She has been an amazing leader, has pushed me to think of new things, to try harder, to dig deeper. To Jen, who has sat through meetings and given suggestions. And then so many thanks to Tina for sponsoring this project, for cheering me on, and for providing so much organizational support. Thank you to the professors and the program directors, and to all of you.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for that excellent presentation. This is our opportunity now to ask Margaret any questions that you might have, something you want to know a little bit more about, something you have a question about. We'll open it up. And Margaret, if you'll unshare your screen now, we can see everyone.
I can find where that button went.
I think it's at the...
Where is the unshare?
Hover over the top maybe and see if it might be a little like thing that comes out when you.
There you go. You got it.
Okay. I'm better at Teams than I am Zoom.
Margaret, you did a great job presenting your proposal. It's so interesting when you hear somebody present it, even after you've read it and maybe thought about it a lot. Some questions came up for me. I got to thinking about how often workplace violence events occur. You reported the frequencies in terms of like per year, right? So, and I know you want to try to be able to touch base with some of the employees who maybe experience workplace violence during the project implementation phase, right? What do you anticipate will be kind of the numbers of possible events in this next 3 to 4 months, so that you can capture a little bit of personal information about their experience?
I'd say we average 3 to 5 I hate to say this, Tina, but it depends on which patient gets admitted. There's some where you get 3 or 4 people hurt in a period of 2 or 3 days. I don't think we've had anybody hurt in the last week or so.
Okay.
So it comes and goes. I think 5 a month is about an expected, and I think because it'll be in the winter where our census is higher, and honestly more of the older dementia patients that tend to hurt our staff come in with urosepsis.
Okay.
I think I'll have a good population to work from.
Okay.
I have a similar question, or maybe it's tagging on to that. You're tracking all of this data, and even just the pre and post questions of the participants in your trainings. Obviously, you're tracking data for a much longer time than the project implementation period. I mean, I guess, of course you are. I was going to say, are you concerned at all about having enough post sort of data by the time you are disseminating, or by the time you are in that final summer semester of work and it relates to number of incidents, but it also relates to just the time that it takes to put these people through training and then have a difference in the way your organization functions around this issue. It's not a short or a fast process. So how have you thought about that?
That's why the main data point is really that pre-post survey of leaders. So that's really what this project dissemination will be, and then the long-term tracking will then be further out. But yeah, I fully expect that there'll be 2 years before you really start seeing the organization shift. So that's why Dr. Yoder highly suggested that the main data point for this project and would be that pre-post.
Well, and like, it's exciting to me to hear you say that, because then you have like this other tier that you can come back to in 2 years and publish about, that's like a longer term. So yeah. Cool.
And then hopefully I'll have, other facilities too, like implement this here, and then, I'll be picking up at other hospitals and implementing it elsewhere, and then we can track the same sort of thing across 3 hospitals. That's even more fun.
It also just occurred to me that with the subpoena process changes, Margaret, are trying to clarify and make that available. Maybe you need to include a measure that also tracks the number of subpoenas that are filed successfully, or some kind of, I don't know, I welcome other people's input on this too, like another short-term measure that could still possibly be accomplished in 1 or 2 months while you're doing your project implementation.
Yeah.
Or circling back to some of the driving forces that you discovered in your voice of the customer that raised the subpoena process as an issue, trying to go back to that and check in what is working well. Are the changes making a difference? Yeah.
Good idea.
Nice work, Margaret. I appreciated and enjoyed your presentation. I was wondering, you talked very briefly and had a couple qualitative questions there and talked about gathering qualitative data. How do you plan to analyze, or what are you going to do with that data that you're collecting?
I think for the most part, like the following up with staff, one, to use it to make sure the project is actually meeting the aims and I'm not missing something that would improve. I hadn't thought about whether this would be a mixed methods as I reported. I think we would definitely track that data. I would put it into the IRB safe environment, and then I would be open to doing some qualitative review. There's a lot of this workplace violence does have a lot of qualitative review type or mixed methods data. So I think depending on the number of responses and what comes out of it, I'd be open to having someone help with a qualitative analysis as well. But if you don't have the data, you can't do anything with it. So.
Hey, Margaret. And I think one key point here is we know it's underreported, right? And so I guess my question for you is, we get reports when they do report workplace violence, but then how many of those employees are actually not moving forward with, a criminal, putting those assault charges on? Are you going to look at that also, and try to see if that, because of the process with the subpoena process and that? And I know a lot of employees, our staff, do not want to do that. They don't want to get involved, so it is underreported. And then the ones that are reporting it in our system that we have, just they're like, no, I don't want to go any further with this. So are you tracking to see if this is going to increase with the support that they're going to have moving forward?
It's definitely something to track. What I'm hearing anecdotally as I talk to people is people have tried, or we pressed charges and they got dropped. And then when I realized that coincided with the with the change of when risk management and security used to know about it. Mm-hmm. And so now, since it's just the employee and their leader that know about that subpoena process, they're not involving risk and security. I think they already know, so they don't need to, because nobody told leaders that risk and security were no longer being notified. So they're going to court, and the hospital has not provided any evidence. They have not provided any videos. Okay. They've not added any documentation. And so they're like, I go to court and the case is dropped because we didn't have any evidence. It was just my testimony. And there was nothing, the organization, the hospital had not provided what they needed. And so now the word on the street is, don't bother. You'll take a day off. You'll take a day off. Your court case will get postponed. You'll take another day off. Mm-hmm. Your court case, you've rearranged your schedule like 4 times. You finally show up, and the judge dismisses it. And so until we can show that your effort makes a difference and that we are here behind you to support you, people just aren't going to bother, because that is absolutely, I'm hearing this, it's a time clock. I'm hearing people talk about it. There's no point. And so I think we need to change that organizational perception of, we will be behind you and help strengthen that case.
And also it's scary for the staff, because they feel, there might be retaliation or something. So it's that fear factor also on, and going to court. I've been there with staff members, and you do have to, the person that assaulted you is there also. So it's that fear of doing that too. But I just appreciate you, Margaret. This is a great project, and you did a really good job. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
I don't know if you saw Don's comment. Margaret said,
yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments before we head out? Well, congratulations on this presentation again, Margaret. Thank you all for coming and supporting Margaret and asking questions and providing input. At this time, I will invite our guest to go on about their evening, and Laura and Jewel and Margaret and I will hang out for a little bit longer.
Thank you guys.
Take care. Coming. Good seeing you, Melody. See ya.
Good to see you, Tina. You want to stop record there for a minute, Jewel?
I think it's fine to keep going. Like,
and then it'll just, I see what you're saying. Okay. So Margaret, we typically take a little bit of a break here to biological meet biological needs and whatever physiological, whatever that might be, whether it's standing or heading.
I have one job and I'm really subpar at it here tonight. Sorry, guys.
Oh, Margaret, great job.
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, interestingly enough, my questions were mainly more about like short-term types of measures. And I think that there was some discussion that I think maybe there's a couple of things you could think about adding that might be some good ways to have a little bit more for your dissemination of this part of the project, because, you know, ultimately this is a very long-term, as you mentioned, long-term sort of process change or project. And so having some things to demonstrate and to analyze, yeah, will be good. But I mean, those were going to be my main questions, I think. And I think that's already been discussed and clarified a bit. So.
Margaret, can you help me understand how many people will be doing the training, if that's the main like pre-post of this? I know it's just one hospital system, but about how many people do you think that it's going to be?
My aim is 50 out of the 100 people in that pool.
Okay. All right. Sorry if you said that. I might have missed
No.
it. And then
I know I spoke very fast.
It was
That's
fantastic.
good.
Again, such a wealth of data to clearly, like, I in my notes, I'm like, needs assessment. Like,
Uh-huh.
you clearly articulate why this is needed, and in a shocking fashion, honestly, for somebody that's not really looked into this and dealt with NICU babies their whole life. I'm like, ooh, what? Stop being violent. Sort of following up with what other people have said of kind of short-term things. I know that you kind of said you would start your every other check-ins May, July. Again, because I run your implementation class, is there a reason those check-ins need to wait that long? Like, what's going to happen for the 5 months that you're sort of in implementation from January till April is kind of when you're in my course. And so I'm kind of wondering, is there any way to start some of those meetings sooner? And again, I didn't have enough time to spend on your timeline. Even though you sent that ahead of time, I should have kind of looked it over and stuff. But yeah, I'm just wondering, is there any way to document some of that work
I
earlier?
remember, let me pull back my timeline.
There was a slide that had like May. I remember seeing that too, like May.
Which was lovely. I'm like, whoo.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm thinking the educational offerings for unit leaders would be February and March.
Okay.
So I could start in April instead of May. I was wanting kind of like a month for them to be using that new process. I think that was where my thought was. Okay, so if I finish the final classes in March, then
I think you
they
should
would be
start.
doing that.
I think you should start right after you finish the training.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't hesitate. Just start. Yeah, because they got the training.
Yep.
And as soon as they've gotten the training, you can start watching what's going on.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep, absolutely.
Then one other question about your slides too was there's a slide number 5 under your theoretical framework that was a mapping slide, and it was hard to see because it was just kind of small on your thing, but it was, you know, kind of a how does trauma informed care play into all these things, which was honestly amazingly well done. And I was kind of like, oh, this is a very cool modeling of like how all these concepts fit together and stuff. I didn't see a citation on there, and maybe that's because it's your work. So I guess that's your question, Margaret. Was that something you yourself did?
I told her to.
I
told her to. I told her to take.
I'm even more impressed now. No.
Yeah, I told her to take the theory and put it into a conceptual map so that she could connect this trauma-informed care with what she
was awesome.
accomplished.
Yeah. It's hard to tell because of what you present with your Six Sigma stuff of like the tools are so well done that I'm like, is this like one of their tools, or is this is a Margaret and Laura tool? Nice. Well done, ladies. Love that. It's perfect.
Laura pushed me in so many great ways.
She's good at that.
It's a lovely project. So, woohoo.
Yeah, I
was like, you want me to write what?
But at the same time too, it's not like, I mean, Margaret, you're very easy to give feedback to because you do something with it. And I think honestly, you have the insights already. It's just fitting them into this academic, mold
that concept map took me like 4 hours.
Your background work and evidence of why this is important and all the data and what you've done so far as part of that Six Sigma lean process. You've done a lot of
Amazing.
work.
Mhm. What did the literature show, Margaret, about I can't remember what your practice site lady's name is, Tina. She brought up this idea of it, being kind of scary. And again, this is just such a foreign concept to me. And you alluded to sort of like the elderly population, coming in and stuff. I guess I just have to ask the question, like, how do nurses feel about like actually doing charges against old people like that? That feels like
They
that's a
tend
project in
to
and of
not,
itself.
yeah, they tend to not press charges. And actually, I had this conversation with my husband, yeah, because he hears a lot about this. He has a friend from high school who's in jail, and his friend was telling him the story of when he'd fallen off a roof and was in a lot of pain, and he kicked a nurse who was pregnant. And my husband's like, my friend really wishes he could have apologized to that nurse when he came out of it. What kind of impact does that carry? And what I think I'm getting from the literature and my sense from the conversations I have with peers is that we recognize when people are not in their right mind. It's really the people that seem to be intentionally continuing to harm because they're
Okay.
those are the ones they press charges. And we have what we call the frequent flyers. I was alluding that a little bit with Tina. There's a couple of patients that have taken out probably 13 nurses this
Oh,
year.
wow.
Okay.
There's one that took out, I think that I had 6 or 7 incidents reports in a matter of 3 days across 4 units. ED, one med surg unit, critical care, progressive care, back to a different med surg unit.
Yeah.
That patient, those are the people they're pressing charges on, who seem to be under control of their facilities. Not really the old people, although we did trespass a elderly visitor who choked a nurse recently. It was a visitor to a patient who got upset because they thought this person was going home, and she choked the nurse. And we actually no trespass this woman, who was very ashamed of herself. But these things happen.
Wow.
Right? The woman was like 90, a visitor.
Oh, it's not funny. I mean, but yeah. I mean, you laugh, but it's not funny.
Right.
We have to do better for staff.
Yeah. Well, that's helpful. Thanks you for answering that.
Just like in the nursing care planning process, when you remember in nursing school when you had to write your patient goals and then the evaluation plan, I think about how it would probably be good to just go back through your voice of the customer stuff one more time and look for points in there that could help you develop just 1 or 2 more short-term goals that you could measure. Okay. And just make sure you have those articulated before you really get going, because you need that. It's just good to have that. If that makes sense.
Anything else, or are we ready to break out?
We're ready to break out.
All right, we're going to break out. Margaret, don't go too far.
All right.
We'll be back.
All right.
Jules going to put us in a breakout room. Maybe.
I am. Bear with me.
No, you're good.
All right, we'll be back here, Margaret.
All right. Leaders back questions, they can use themselves to break out very much before they can decide whether they say yes, but they haven't asked any horrible questions, but they want 2 more short-term objectives to monitor. But they like the project. I folded all of my links to the process. I'm glad today's almost over. People can't. Yeah, the drinking is fun. It's a cheap ball. Everybody loves it. I heard like at least 7 people. Yeah, the fun drinks were absolutely the best. Moving to games went okay. I just did I ever show you the concept map for this thing that Laura made me do? They're like, you didn't cite the concept map, or did you write it? I was like, Laura's like, I made her write one. They're like, wow. You can see it? Yeah. Late tomorrow after 7 o'clock that I might just do from home. Oh yeah, definitely. Workplace violence, want to prevent impacts that or not creates trauma. These are the 4 standards of trauma-informed care, which feed into the interventions. Here's kind of the debriefings, pamphlet, peer support for these goals for that result. Nice girl. You're like, feel like 4 freaking hours to create that concept map. Oh, I'm sure. I had to do it in Visio. I was like, oh my god. Do you want your door closed? Doesn't matter. Yeah, see, I pulled all. Look at you. I pulled in all the. There's the FMEA, the others are beginning. The process map is too confusing to do any other way than that. Here my 5 box, my voice the customer, and my 5 lives. Yeah. I think I'm just doing this to Anthony. Oh my gosh, she was like, oh, yeah. I got nothing out of it. Like I taught myself what I learned with that one. I really love Greenville. I was so excited about it, and then I was very disappointed. So I would love to be able to do it again. Maybe I can just do it with you in my next project, me, and you can mentor me through. I've asked for black belt training. I'm hoping to do that this year. And then that way, like, I can learn how to do it the right way instead of just having to try and wing it and hope I'm doing it right. To me, Lean Six Sigma makes so much sense. And it's something that I would really, 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 really like, again, if I would have been taught properly. Anthony was so good. I know. She, every time we would talk, she'd be like, I wish you had Anthony. I'm like, I do too. This is so perfect. Oh. Which reminds me, I need to do my follow-up Lean Six Sigma data points. I got to do. Don't let me forget that. I'm not gonna get to it until Thursday. We have to land the month. Just remind me so I put it on my to-do list. Well, that's why I'm like, I just need to do it, or yeah, I'm gonna get the nasty gram of
All right. Can you hear us, Margaret?
I can.
Well, I get to say congratulations. You have successfully defended your project proposal for the DNP, and you may now use the credential DNP-C for candidate, DNP
Okay.
candidate. I think that's what that stands for, right? Okay.
Yep.
He needed
And
more, more credentials, it looked like.
yeah,
Yeah, it looked like you needed a few more.
yeah, we're just really excited about your project and very impressed by the presentation and work that you've done so far. I'm going to try to summarize just the few recommendations that we have for you. So you can take notes on this if you'd like. We are thinking about how the project hours are going to be, the bulk of your work in spring semester. And you can and should think about how you will use time to collaborate with risk management and security and to really keep the communication lines open with them and work together with them. We also thought that another short-term measure or action, an intervention, and maybe not something to measure, but something else that you could include as an action is to really work at PR with the staff. So you're doing the brochure, but to help change this sort of attitudinal, this response that you verbally named where staff are like, oh, I'm not going to press charges because it doesn't work. What can you do as sort of a staff-facing push to say, no, here is what we're going to do. Whether it's in, I don't know how those things get communicated to staff, but whatever you can creatively do to be staff-facing just as much as you are the leaders, facing the leaders. Mm-hmm. As Tina Bibb suggested, maybe to really carefully track the number of assaults that do result in that are reported, and then also that are include charges, and figure out a way to make sure you're capturing how often that's occurring, whether it was a successful process. And anticipating that there may be an increase in the number of reports. I think you already mentioned that, but just have a plan for tracking that. Yeah. Did I miss anything, Melody and Jewel?
I don't think so. You had already mentioned about going back to her customer.
Yeah.
Going back to the voice of the customer.
Voice of the customer. I can't ever remember that.
And again, are there any short-term measures that you could use? This is often the hardest part of the projects that have those bigger organizational metrics that don't get measured except for every quarter or maybe every month, then to try to think about how you're going to monitor process change on the short term.
Yeah,
Margaret,
I'd like if I can move up my education for leaders, so I have more months of tracking that data.
Yeah,
that would be good too,
mm-hmm.
if it's possible. Yep.
We'll see.
Margaret, I will take this video in the next, day or so here. I want to get it into your hands. Not that there's a lot for you to have to glean out of this, but anyhow, I'll make sure that the people on this group have a copy of this video, and you can just keep rewatching how awesome you are.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, and for the EMU, this will actually fall under a classroom project. And so what I'll do for the EMU students is I'll fill out a faculty assurance form. I'll probably take your abstract and fill out a faculty assurance form and submit it to the IRB. Because it's quality improvement, it will fall under that classroom project or whatever. So yeah.
And I've already done the quality improvement work that I need to do here. So I'll just need to do IRB here to disseminate, which I'd like to do. So
yeah, definitely.
Do you need anything from us in relation to that process?
No, because they won't take your IRB at all. They have to be the primary, so it doesn't matter whether y'all approve it or not.
Yeah, I know.
I've got to start from scratch. I have another research project I'm in the middle of, so I'm very familiar with
You're used to it.
And again, Margaret, now that you have gotten our verbal approval, it's not too soon to start on the IRB for that, like
Yep.
tomorrow.
Go ahead. Yeah.
It's due about week 5 of my class. That's a little, I'm like usually like get that done so that people can be doing the thing. So yeah, you're on the ball. So you've got this. Ladies,
Yeah.
lovely evening. Margaret, you did a
Yeah.
fantastic job.
Congratulations again, Margaret.
Yep.
Good job.
All right.
Go
I'll see you guys.
celebrate.
Yeah.
You
Thank
sleep
you.
well tonight.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll do.
Way to
All
go,
right.
Margaret.
Well done.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.